In the distant reaches of the Andromeda Galaxy, within the ethereal clouds of the Veil sector, there existed a place where the brightest minds of countless alien species gathered. The Galactic Academy. It was not merely a school. It was a towering beacon of knowledge, a structure that seemed to float effortlessly within a bubble of folded spacetime. The Academy's grand halls and vast lecture chambers were home to those who sought to understand the universe, conquer the mysteries of science, diplomacy, and most notably, warfare. Students came from far and wide to study here, from the towering Corian, whose crystalline exoskeletons glittered like gems, to the Mayans, tiny telepathic beings whose minds were as vast as the cosmos. Even the Stoic Vaxians, creatures known for their calm and emotionless demeanor, sat alongside the more lively species, all bound together by their quest for knowledge. Despite the vast array of subjects offered, one class remained the most coveted, shrouded in mystery and rumor. It was the Advanced Warfare Tactics course, a subject reserved for the elite. This wasn't just any military training. This was a course for those who would shape the future of galactic conflict, taught by none other than the fearsome Professor Orcs. Professor Orcs was an alien like no other. With 6 lithe, powerful limbs, each ending in sharp claws, he towered above most of his students. His violet eyes, deep and penetrating, seemed to gaze straight into the soul, while his bioluminescent skin glowed faintly in the darkened lecture halls. Though his students often whispered about his unusual methods, no one could deny his brilliance. And there was another, far more compelling reason why the Advanced Warfare Tactics class drew the curiosity of so many. Professor Orcs was said to know the real reason humans, a seemingly insignificant species from a small planet known as Earth, were banned from galactic warfare. This question had lingered in the minds of countless beings across the galaxy. It was an enigma that had remained unsolved for centuries. Why were the humans excluded from participating in the grand conflicts that had shaped the galaxy? Were they too dangerous, too unpredictable? Or was there something deeper, something hidden from the public eye? On this particular day, the lecture hall buzzed with excitement. Students from all species gathered, whispering amongst themselves, their curiosity palpable. Many had heard rumors about the secrets Professor Orcs would reveal today, and even the usually impassive Vaxians couldn't suppress their eager anticipation. As the minutes stretched on, the door to the lecture hall opened with a soft hiss, and in strode Professor Orcs. The room fell silent in an instant. He moved with an air of authority that commanded respect, his glowing skin lighting up the room as he made his way to the front of the lecture hall. His 6 limbs moved fluidly, each step calculated and deliberate. Once at the front, he turned to face his students, his violet eyes scanning the room. Today, Orcs began, his voice resonating deep in their chests. We shall delve into a subject that has long been considered taboo. You have all wondered why the species known as humans, from the planet Earth, have been banned from participating in galactic warfare. Today, you will learn the truth. But be warned, this knowledge comes with a heavy price. There was an unsettling hush as the students exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't the usual tactical lecture. The professor's tone was different, almost somber. There was a certain weight to his words, an undercurrent of something deeper and darker. It was as if the very knowledge he was about to impart could shatter the carefully constructed narrative of galactic history. With a wave of his clawed hand, the professor activated the room's holographic projector. The image that appeared was a stunning 3D rendering of Earth, rotating slowly in the center of the room. The blue oceans shimmered beneath the sun, and the green continents seemed peaceful, almost idyllic. It was a sight many of the students had never seen up close. This, Orcs continued, his voice taking on an eerie quality, is Earth, a planet located in the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy. At first glance, it seems unremarkable. Its inhabitants, the humans, are a young species. They are technologically inferior compared to most of the civilizations represented here, and yet, they are the only species in the entire galaxy banned from taking part in galactic warfare. The students leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide with curiosity. Why were the humans so different? What was so dangerous about them that the galaxy had deemed them unfit to participate in the grand wars that had shaped the universe? Now, Quark's voice grew even darker. To understand why, we must go back more than 5 centuries, to the time of the Great Galactic War. A war that nearly tore this galaxy apart. The hologram shifted, displaying a chaotic scene of battle. Massive fleets clashing in the void of space, ships engaged in fierce combat, and planets besieged by forces from all sides. The scale of destruction was staggering. For a moment, the students were left in stunned silence, absorbing the magnitude of what they were witnessing. The war was fought between the Galactic Council and the Crawl, Quarks explained. The Crawl were a ruthless species from the Omega Quadrant, a race of conquerors who sought nothing less than the complete subjugation of the galaxy. Their technology was advanced, their numbers overwhelming. The galaxy was on the brink of collapse. The hologram zoomed in on the galactic fleet, a motley assembly of ships from various species, all fighting against the Crawl. Despite their combined strength, the Galactic Council was losing. They couldn't keep up with the relentless assault of the Crawl forces. It was a time of desperation, a time when the galaxy had no choice but to turn to the one species they had long considered insignificant, the humans. As the war reached its peak, Quarks continued, his tone now carrying a mixture of awe and disbelief. The Galactic Council, on the verge of collapse, reached out to Earth for help. Though humans had not yet mastered space warfare, they had shown remarkable ingenuity and adaptability in their early spacefaring missions. The hologram shifted again, showing early human spacecraft. They were primitive by galactic standards, clunky, slow, and equipped with rudimentary weapons. Yet there was something about their design, something that set them apart from the other species. The humans, Quarks said, are unlike any other species. Their evolution has gifted them with an unparalleled adaptability, a fierce will to survive, and an imagination that knows no bounds. They do not fight according to conventional rules. They think beyond the limits others impose upon them. The room fell silent as the students began to grasp the magnitude of what they were about to learn. They had come to the academy seeking knowledge about war and tactics, but they were about to uncover a truth that would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy, and the humans who inhabited the distant planet of Earth. And so, the tale of the Great Galactic War, and the shocking reason humans were banned from participating, was about to unfold, and it would leave its mark on every student in that room. As Professor Quarks continued, the room grew even more still. The soft hum of the holographic projector was the only sound that broke the silence. The students, be they towering, agile, or even telepathic, had all become enraptured by the professor's tale. What they were hearing wasn't just history. It was the very secret that had been locked away, buried beneath layers of galactic diplomacy and manipulation for centuries. The humans, Quarks said, his voice reverberating with a dark, almost reverent tone, did not fight like anyone else. The Galactic Council believed they would be mere cannon fodder, useful for filling the gaps in the war effort. But what they didn't understand was the human mind. Specifically, their capacity for something called strategic thinking. The hologram shifted again, this time showing the human ship, a crude, unrefined piece of metal compared to the sleek, advanced vessels of the Galactic Council. But there was something extraordinary about it. The ship was a hodgepodge of parts, bolted together with minimal regard for aesthetics. Yet it moved with a surprising speed and agility, evading the most sophisticated enemy fire. Humans don't follow rules, Quarks explained. They take risks. They break patterns. Where others see order, they see opportunities for chaos. Where others predict a tactic, they choose the unexpected. This unpredictability made them a weapon unlike any other. The projector showed a human warship clashing with a Crawl dreadnought, massive and imposing in design. The Crawl ship unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, yet the human ship danced around them with an almost impossible grace. It was clear that the humans had something the Crawl had never encountered before: the ability to think unpredictably, to adapt mid-battle. Instead of engaging in a straight-up fight, the humans began to use guerrilla tactics, hit and run, feints, and traps that made no logical sense to anyone else. And that's when the Crawl began to lose. Quarks's voice lowered as he recounted the pivotal moment. For the first time in the war, they were caught off guard. The Crawl thought they were facing a primitive species that would break under pressure, but the humans thrived in the chaos. The holographic scene shifted again, showing a massive coordinated human assault on a heavily fortified Crawl space station. The humans didn't send a fleet of ships. No, they sent small, seemingly insignificant groups of fighters, each with their own plan, each acting independently, but in perfect harmony. The Crawl, used to the order and precision of their own forces, were overwhelmed by the sudden, unpredictable nature of the human onslaught. It was a decisive moment in the war. By the time the war ended, Quarks continued, his eyes narrowing, as if he were recounting a long-held secret. The Crawl were defeated, and the Galactic Council emerged victorious. But at what cost? He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. The students exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that something was coming, something they hadn't anticipated. The humans had done what no other species could, Quarks said gravely. They had single-handedly turned the tide of the war. But in doing so, they unlocked something much darker. The galaxy's powers, the Council and the Crawl alike, realized that humanity had the potential to destroy the delicate balance that had been maintained for centuries. They saw how the human mind could disrupt the very foundation of galactic order. The room went cold. The students were no longer just hearing about a victory. They were hearing about a force that threatened to unravel everything the galaxy had worked so hard to build. The very thing that made humans valuable in war also made them dangerous. They realized, Quarks continued, his voice almost a whisper, that if humans were allowed to enter galactic warfare on their own terms, they could reshape the entire galaxy, not through strength, but through innovation and unpredictability. In a way, the humans were a virus in the galactic system, able to spread and adapt beyond the control of anyone who thought they could control them. And if they were unleashed, they would alter everything. The hologram now showed images of the Galactic Council's secret meeting, where the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful races had gathered in fear. The faces of alien leaders, some stern and calculating, others filled with uncertainty, appeared on the holographic display. They spoke in hushed tones, debating what to do with the humans. Some argued that humanity's contribution to the war had been invaluable. Others, especially the Crawl, viewed them as a threat to their very survival. There were talks of genocide, of eradicating humanity before they could become a threat, Quarks revealed, his voice colder now. But in the end, the Council chose a different path. They decided that humanity would be allowed to live, but they would be banished from the wars that shaped the galaxy. They would be kept out of the great conflicts and isolated from the rest of the galaxy. The room was silent, the students unable to grasp the implications of what they were hearing. They had always believed that the humans were forbidden from war because they lacked the capability for it, that their technology was not advanced enough to keep up with the galactic superpowers. But now, they understood the truth. Humanity wasn't banned because they were weak. It was because they were too strong in ways that no one had anticipated. And that, Quark said, his gaze turning piercing, is why humans have been cast aside. Their minds are too unpredictable, too dangerous for the carefully constructed order of the galaxy. And the ban, it was not just to protect the galaxy from the humans. It was to protect the humans from themselves. The hologram flickered once more, showing a final image, a human child, standing alone in a field, looking up at the stars. The simplicity of the image contrasted sharply with the intensity of the lecture. Perhaps the greatest irony of all, Quarks said softly, is that the very thing that made humans so dangerous, their capacity to adapt, to break free from the systems they are part of, is the very thing that may one day save them. The professor's words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. The students were left to ponder a galaxy where the fate of a single species could alter everything, where the smallest and most unpredictable force had been set apart, relegated to the shadows. But the question that remained, unspoken but clear in every mind, was what would happen when humanity's ban was finally lifted? As the lecture ended and the students filed out of the room, the whispers began. There were many questions left unanswered, many dangers yet to be uncovered. But one thing was certain. The story of humanity was far from over. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, the humans were watching. And they were waiting. The weeks following Professor Quarks's lecture were a blur for the students. They couldn't shake the weight of what they'd learned. The truth about humanity's role in the galaxy and its potential to reshape everything. It was as if the professor's words had ignited something within them, a lingering sense of unease that was impossible to ignore. There were murmurs in the halls, heated debates in the corridors of the university, and a sudden, silent understanding among many of the older races of the galaxy that they could no longer afford to ignore humanity's rising influence. But for Zira, a young Arcturian student, it was different. She had been raised to believe that the galaxy's order was absolute, that the Galactic Council's decisions were immutable. The humans, to her, had always been little more than a footnote in the grand history of the galaxy, an unimportant species relegated to the fringes of civilization. But now, after hearing Quarks's lecture, something had shifted in her. She could no longer view humanity with the same indifference. One evening, Zira found herself wandering the vast library of the university, an ancient structure built long before the Council's reign. The towering shelves stretched high into the ceiling, holding thousands of records, both historical and classified. She knew the library contained some of the galaxy's deepest secrets, and as her curiosity grew, so did her desire to uncover more. She had spent days after the lecture going through old records, searching for any trace of humanity's actions since the end of the war. Most of the data was sparse, coded in a language few could read, yet there were a few scattered references to human encounters, both open and covered. The further she dug, the more she began to see signs of a greater truth. Humanity wasn't just waiting in isolation. They were building something, hidden from the eyes of the galaxy, something that could not be ignored for much longer. One late night, while poring over a particularly old manuscript, Zira stumbled upon something truly remarkable. A record, encrypted with the highest level of security, detailing a covert operation conducted by the Galactic Council shortly after the human war with the Crawl. It was titled simply, The Genesis Project. Intrigued, Zira worked quickly to decrypt it, knowing that if anyone else found her digging into restricted files, it could mean severe consequences. The document she uncovered painted a chilling picture. The Genesis Project was not just a banishment of humans from galactic conflicts. It was an experiment, a preparation for something far more insidious. The Council, in their fear of humanity's potential, had secretly begun to manipulate human DNA. They had started by introducing subtle genetic modifications designed to increase certain traits that could be used for control. Traits like adaptability, intelligence, and most terrifying of all, empathy. The project's goal was simple. If humanity was so unpredictable, they could be molded into a perfect weapon. The Council had hoped to create a new breed of human, one that could be controlled, who would follow orders without question, and who could be used to enforce the galaxy's existing balance of power. But as Zira read on, she saw the darker truth. Humanity's independence, their stubborn streak of free will, had never been fully suppressed. The modifications had succeeded in some ways, but had also sparked a rebellion, a defiance within the humans themselves. Zira's heart raced as she read the final lines of the document. It warned that the Genesis Project had been abandoned years ago due to unforeseen consequences. The humans, despite the alterations, had retained their free will and their capacity for chaos. Worse yet, many of the modified humans had begun to form secret factions, ones that were no longer aligned with the Galactic Council's objectives. The document ended with a chilling prophecy. The Genesis Project will awaken when the human mind reaches its full potential. When that time comes, the Council will no longer be able to control the outcome. Zira closed the file, her mind reeling. The implications were staggering. The humans were not just a force of chaos in the galaxy. They had been altered, engineered, and shaped into something even more unpredictable. And the Council had known this all along. Determined to understand what this meant, Zira sought out a forbidden source, a figure she had only heard whispered about in dark corners of the university, a human named Elias Kane. Kane was rumored to be one of the last survivors of the Genesis Project, a human who had escaped the Council's manipulation. Some said he had even started a movement, a resistance that sought to free humanity from the shackles of both the Council and the genetic modifications they had imposed. Tracking him down wasn't easy. Elias Kane was a ghost, slipping between the cracks of galactic society, leaving no trace of his movements. But Zira's determination led her to a small, forgotten colony on the outer edges of the galaxy, where rumors whispered of a man who had come from the shadows of history. It was here that she found him, though he wasn't what she expected. Elias Kane was not the fierce, militant leader the stories had made him out to be. He was an older man, worn by years of hiding, with a haunted look in his eyes. But when he spoke, it was with the weight of 1,000 secrets, each one more dangerous than the last. "You've uncovered the Genesis Project, haven't you?" Elias said, as though he had known she would find it all along. He leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "You think the humans are the only ones who were changed by the war. But the real truth is, we're all part of the same experiment. Everyone in this galaxy, controlled by the Council's strings. You've learned about our potential, Zira, but you're only seeing half the picture." Zira frowned, unsure of what he meant. Elias continued, "The human mind is a double-edged sword. We are the spark of chaos, yes, but we are also the spark of creation. The galaxy doesn't know what will happen when we finally break free of these chains. We might reshape everything, or we might destroy it all." Zira's heart pounded as she realized the depth of the crisis at hand. The galaxy had feared humanity's chaos, but what if it wasn't chaos they should fear? What if humanity's true potential lay in their ability to create, to invent, to change, to reimagine the very fabric of reality itself? "I've seen what humanity can do when it's unleashed," Elias said softly, "and I've seen the consequences of trying to control that power. If we want to survive, we have to break free of the chains they've put around us. And maybe, just maybe, we'll show this galaxy what true freedom really looks like." The weight of his words hit Zira with the force of a comet. She now understood that the humans were not just a species banished to the fringes. They were on the verge of awakening, on the cusp of something far greater than anyone could have imagined. And as their true potential began to unfold, it would either be the galaxy's salvation or its undoing. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance. The days following Zira's encounter with Elias Kane felt as if the fabric of the universe itself had been torn open. What had once seemed like distant, theoretical knowledge now felt painfully tangible. Zira had spent her life within the comforting constraints of galactic order, the belief that the Galactic Council was a force of stability. But now, standing at the precipice of an unknown future, the foundations beneath her seemed to crumble. The humans, as chaotic and unpredictable as they had been deemed, were on the verge of something far greater, far more dangerous than any of them had realized. Zira could not shake the haunting words Elias had spoken. "We are the spark of chaos, but we are also the spark of creation." They echoed in her mind as she returned to her university dorm, each step weighted by the enormity of the secrets she now carried. Her mind raced with questions. Had the Genesis Project truly been abandoned, as the documents had suggested, or was there more to it? Was Elias just one man, or was he the leader of something far bigger? Unable to contain her restlessness, Zira took to the communication system in the dead of night, a quiet hum filling her room as she accessed the encrypted network. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, answers, perhaps, or perhaps more clues. As the screen flickered to life, a message appeared, seemingly from nowhere. The Council is watching. Do not trust everything you read. The future is in your hands. Zira froze, her breath catching in her throat. The message was signed with a single cryptic symbol, an eye with an open hand beneath it. She recognized the symbol immediately. It was the insignia of the Resistance, the underground movement rumored to be working in secret against the Council's tyranny. But could Elias truly be part of it? Was he leading this movement, or was he merely a pawn in someone else's game? The implications were dizzying. What if everything she had learned, everything she had believed in, was a lie? Zira, once a loyal follower of the Council's order, now found herself standing at the crossroads of history, torn between the world she had known and a future that was as uncertain as it was perilous. Without hesitation, Zira made a decision that would change everything. She would go to the heart of the galaxy, to the very center of the Galactic Council's power. She would confront the truth herself, whatever it may be. As Zira boarded the transport ship, her thoughts drifted to the human war with the Crawl, the war that had cost so much, yet had only scratched the surface of the galaxy's deeper conflict. What if the war wasn't just a battle for survival, but a signal of something more? What if humanity was a catalyst, and the galaxy's response to them had merely set the stage for a much grander struggle? When Zira finally arrived at the Galactic Council's capital, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The once glittering cityscape, a blend of ancient structures and modern technology, now seemed hollow, its gleaming towers standing as silent witnesses to a galaxy on the brink of something new and terrifying. The Council's halls, vast and opulent, hummed with activity. Behind those doors were the architects of the galaxy's order, the beings who had shaped civilizations, destroyed enemies, and guarded the secrets of the stars for millennia. Zira moved through the halls with a mixture of dread and resolve. She was no longer the naive Arcturian student who had once studied the Council's teachings with unwavering faith. The person she had been had already slipped into the shadows, replaced by someone who now saw through the illusion of order. She was searching for one thing, and one thing only: the truth. It wasn't long before she found herself before the Council's most secretive division, the Archives, a place where knowledge that could shatter the balance of power was stored away, hidden from the galaxy's view. As she stepped inside, the air felt heavy, as if it had absorbed centuries of forbidden secrets. The walls were lined with ancient tomes, digital records, and holographic archives, all designed to keep the galaxy's most potent truths locked away. At the heart of the archives was a towering holographic terminal, protected by layers of encryption. Zira could feel the weight of the history it held. With a deep breath, she accessed the terminal, bypassing the security measures one by one. When the system finally hummed to life, revealing the hidden files, Zira's pulse quickened. The truth was here, staring her in the face. As she sifted through the records, she found something that made her blood run cold: a hidden treaty, signed by the highest officials of the Galactic Council, detailing the final stages of the Genesis project. It was not an abandoned experiment as she had believed, but a continuous operation, one that had been refined and expanded upon over the years. The human modifications had not been abandoned. They had been perfected in secret, with humanity's evolution being guided toward a new terrifying goal: the creation of an elite force capable of taking control of the galaxy. The Council had never feared humanity's potential for chaos. They feared humanity's ability to adapt, to innovate, to break free of the chains of power. The Genesis project had been part of a long-term strategy to craft humanity into a species that could overthrow the Council itself, either through revolution or manipulation. The modifications were designed to turn humanity into something more than what it was: a species that could, if unleashed, evolve beyond any of the known races, surpassing them in intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. The treaty concluded with a chilling sentence: when humanity reaches the necessary threshold of potential, they will have the power to unmake the galaxy. The decision to release them, or to contain them, will decide the fate of all civilization. Zira's hands trembled as she read the final line. The Council had always known that humanity was capable of rewriting history. But it was not just the humans who had the power to change the galaxy. It was the very essence of their potential that threatened the entire structure the Council had worked so hard to maintain. As Zira closed the files, a new understanding blossomed within her. The future was no longer a fixed path, dictated by those in power. It was malleable, shaped by forces far more unpredictable than anyone had ever imagined. And humanity, for all its flaws, was the spark that could ignite the galaxy into something unrecognizable. She had to find Elias Kane. She had to join the resistance. Together, they might have the chance to guide the galaxy into the future, or risk seeing it tear itself apart. As Zira left the archives, the weight of her decision settled heavily on her shoulders. There was no going back now. The tides of history were shifting. And whatever came next, she would be part of it. The future was no longer a question of if humanity would awaken. It was a question of who would control the dawn of a new era. Zira didn't know what to expect when she left the archives, but she knew the truth was already unfolding around her. The galaxy's fate was teetering on the edge of a precipice, and the forces that had shaped its destiny for millennia now seemed to crumble before her eyes. The weight of the discovery pressed down on her chest, each breath a reminder of the immense power hidden within humanity, and the Council's fear of it. With her mind set on joining the resistance, Zira took her first steps toward the hidden world of rebellion. But finding them wasn't going to be easy. The resistance was a shadow, operating in the darkest corners of the galaxy, far from the prying eyes of the Council. Their movements were swift and calculated, hidden beneath layers of deception. Elias had spoken of them as if they were just one faction among many, but she now knew the stakes were far higher than anyone had imagined. Zira's journey took her to a remote sector, far from the glittering capitals and the Council's watchful gaze. It was a place where smugglers, mercenaries, and outcasts mingled in the darkness, each with their own reasons for avoiding the Council. The planets here were rugged, untamed worlds, far removed from the carefully curated order Zira had once known. Here, she could hide in plain sight. As her shuttle broke through the atmosphere of a planet known as Zalor 6, Zira felt the cold embrace of uncertainty wrap around her. The planet was a former mining colony, now abandoned after a series of corporate betrayals and a brutal war over its resources. The remnants of once thriving cities were now hollow shells, overrun with scavengers and deserters. But hidden beneath the surface was something else, something she had to find. The resistance. Zira navigated the maze-like streets of Zalor 6's decaying city. The air was thick with the stench of rust and old machinery, and the streets were eerily quiet. She could sense the eyes of the planet's inhabitants on her, but no one dared to approach. She knew what they were, survivors of the chaos, those who had learned long ago that trust was a luxury. As she reached a nondescript building, barely noticeable amidst the ruins, a faint hum filled the air. It was a subtle sound, barely perceptible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. Zira approached the door, her fingers brushing against the cold metal. She hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of what she was about to do, but there was no turning back now. A soft voice came through a hidden speaker embedded in the doorframe. Password. Zira swallowed, steadying her breath. I'm here to speak with Elias Kane. There was a brief silence, followed by a soft click. The door slid open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. She stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest, and was greeted by a figure she didn't expect. An older man with silver hair, his face marked by years of struggle and secrecy. His eyes studied her, calculating, but there was something familiar in his gaze. She had seen that same intensity in Elias Kane, This was no stranger to the Resistance. This was someone who had lived through the dark corners of the galaxy. "You're a long way from home," the man said, his voice low but steady. "I need to speak to Elias," Zira replied, her voice firm despite the uncertainty that churned inside her. The man nodded, not questioning her, but instead signaling for her to follow him down the hallway. She didn't ask any more questions, trusting that whatever would come next, she would be ready. They reached a large room, where a holographic map of the galaxy hovered in the air. Figures were moving across it, lights flickering as they highlighted key locations. And there, in the center of it all, stood Elias Kane. His presence was magnetic, even through the hologram. His eyes locked with hers as she entered, a silent understanding passing between them. "You found us," Elias said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had waited for this moment. "I know the truth," Zira replied, her words cutting through the tension. "The Genesis Project, the Council's plans, what they're really doing with humanity." Elias nodded slowly. "I knew you would. The Council's grip on the galaxy has never been about peace. It's about control. And now that they know humanity is capable of breaking free, they fear us more than they ever did the Crawl. They've been using you, using all of us, to shape the future into something they can control. But the truth is, the future isn't theirs to command anymore." Zira felt a fire stir within her. Elias wasn't just speaking about a future for humanity. He was speaking about freedom. The kind of freedom that could break the chains of the Council's order once and for all. She had seen the dark side of the Council, their manipulations, their hidden motives, and the terrible power they sought to wield. But now she was in the presence of something else entirely, a force that had been waiting in the shadows to strike. "You're the spark, Zira," Elias continued. "The Resistance has been waiting for someone who can bridge the gap between the old order and the new one. You know their systems. You understand their tactics. You're one of them, but you're also something else, a part of what we're fighting for." Zira's heart raced. What are we fighting for, exactly? What's the next move? Elias stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "We're not just fighting for the destruction of the Council. We're fighting for something far bigger. The future of every race in the galaxy. The power to choose our destiny. The ability to create a new order, one that doesn't suppress individuality, creativity, or evolution. The Genesis Project wasn't just about creating a weapon. It was about unlocking the potential of humanity. And now, we're unlocking it for everyone." Zira took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't just joining a rebellion. She was becoming part of something much greater, an entire movement dedicated to reshaping the galaxy, to pulling it out from the suffocating grip of the Council. This wasn't about war for the sake of war. This was about giving all sentient beings the chance to evolve, to break free of the systems that had defined them for centuries. Elias motioned to the map. "We've already begun gathering allies. The Crawl, the Dresh, even the Oran. The old alliances are falling apart. The Council's hold is slipping, and it's time we took action. The first strike will be swift. We hit their most vulnerable point, the one they least expect. And once the Council's power begins to unravel, we'll be ready to guide the galaxy into its next phase." Zira stood before him, a new fire in her eyes. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She had chosen her side. The galaxy's future was no longer in the hands of the Council. It was in hers. And with Elias Kane and the Resistance at her side, she would fight for a future where every being had the power to choose their own destiny. The war for the galaxy had begun, and Zira was ready to lead the charge. Zira's heart pounded as she stood among the Resistance's leaders, the map of the galaxy swirling with strategic points that would mark the beginning of the end for the Council's reign. Each flicker of light on the holographic display represented a target, worlds, stations, resources, and the secret strongholds of the Council that had controlled the galaxy for centuries. But now, In the midst of the flickering shadows of these beacons, Zira felt a fierce certainty rise within her. She was no longer a mere observer to the galaxy's struggles. She was part of the fight, a part of something that could change everything. Elias Kane's voice broke through her thoughts. The first phase is critical. We strike at the Council's weak point, their communications hub on Lyra 3. Without it, their entire system of control crumbles. No orders, no transmissions, no central coordination. The Council will be left scrambling, unable to send reinforcements or relay vital commands. Zira absorbed the information, her mind racing. She'd once studied the intricate networks of the Council's power. Lyra 3 was their communication nexus, the heart of their entire strategic web. If the Resistance could take it down, it would send a shockwave throughout the entire galaxy. The Council's grip on their empire would weaken, and the flames of rebellion would spread like wildfire. Elias met her gaze. "I'm sending you to lead the mission. You know the Council's systems better than anyone. You'll infiltrate their ranks, disable their systems, and make sure their command structure is severed. We'll be in place to provide support. But this one has to be your victory." Zira felt the weight of his words settle over her like a heavy cloak. Lead the mission. It was one thing to be part of the fight, but to lead a strike against the very heart of the Council's power. It was a daunting task. Still, she had no time for hesitation. She had already made her choice. She would stand with the Resistance, not just as a participant, but as a leader. She nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'll do it. I'll get us in, and I'll make sure the Council falls." As she prepared for the mission, Zira couldn't help but think back to the journey that had led her here. The galaxy had always seemed like a place of order, of logic, and systems that ensured peace and stability. But beneath that facade, the truth had always simmered just beneath the surface. The Council's rule was built on lies and control, on a network of power that suppressed any real growth or freedom. Now, the path ahead was one of chaos, of rebellion, but it was also a path to something greater. A chance for every individual to shape their own future. The Resistance wasn't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the very soul of the galaxy. The days leading up to the operation were filled with planning and preparation. Zira worked with a team of specialized Resistance operatives, each of them a master in their craft. Hackers, saboteurs, soldiers. Together, they devised a plan to breach the heavily fortified communications center on Lyra 3. Every detail had to be perfect. One mistake could spell their destruction, and Zira knew the stakes had never been higher. As the strike team gathered in the hangar, ready to board their shuttle, Zira's nerves were steady, but her mind was sharp, focused. She had trained for this moment, studied every piece of technology and procedure the Council used to maintain their hold over the galaxy. She was no longer the young scholar in the archives, afraid of what she might uncover. She was a leader, determined to tear down the empire of control that had subjugated the galaxy for too long. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, and they ascended into the black void of space. Lyra 3 was within reach, but even as Zira stared at the approaching planet, a deep feeling of unease stirred within her. This was the first strike, the opening salvo in what would surely be a long and brutal war. What would happen next? How many lives would be lost? Would this truly be the turning point the galaxy needed? Zira glanced over at Elias, who stood next to her in the cockpit, his face set in grim determination. "This is it," he said quietly. "We've already lost so much, but today we change everything." Zira turned back to the view, watching as the planet Lyra 3 grew larger in the distance. The Resistance would face hardships, betrayals, and sacrifices. But this was a necessary step. To free the galaxy, the Council's reign had to end. The shuttle broke through the atmosphere, and Zira's pulse quickened as the time for planning gave way to action. There would be no turning back now. They landed on the outskirts of Lyra 3's communication hub under the cover of darkness, the city surrounding the facility sprawling like a labyrinth of steel and glass. Zira's team moved swiftly through the shadows, their movements precise and deliberate. She felt a sense of unity with her team, an unspoken trust that flowed between them. Each of them knew the risks, but none hesitated. Zira led the charge, guiding them through the complex security systems with the ease of someone who had once mapped these corridors in her sleep. The Council's defenses, though formidable, were not invincible. Zira had learned their weaknesses, and now it was time to exploit them. As they reached the heart of the communications hub, Zira's breath quickened. They were close now. The core of the Council's control lay just beyond the blast doors ahead. One last barrier. The team gathered around, preparing to breach the final obstacle. Zira's fingers danced over the console, her mind working faster than her hands. The countdown began. The doors hissed open. They were in. The team moved swiftly, disabling systems, detonating charges, and leaving behind nothing but chaos in their wake. Zira's eyes burned with the intensity of the mission, her every action deliberate and unyielding. They had come here to dismantle the Council's ability to command, to break their communication link, and in doing so, they were striking at the heart of their power. But just as they thought victory was within reach, an alarm sounded, a shrill, piercing noise that made Zira's blood run cold. It was the signal they had feared. The Council had anticipated an attack. Reinforcements were already en route. Zira turned to her team. "We've got minutes. We get out now, or we die here." With the blast doors sealing behind them, the resistance team ran. It was a race against time, the weight of the galaxy's fate hanging in the balance. Would they make it out? Would the rebellion's first blow truly land? As Zira led them through the winding corridors, she felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. They had started a war, but now they had to survive it. And if they did, the galaxy would never be the same again. The escape from Lyra 3 was nothing short of chaos. As Zira and her team sprinted through the underground corridors, the distant sound of heavy boots and the crackling hum of blasters filled the air. The Council's reinforcements had arrived faster than expected, their presence a harsh reminder of how deeply entrenched the regime was in every facet of life across the galaxy. Zira's heart pounded as they maneuvered through the labyrinthine passages of the facility, the flashing lights of alarm warnings stinging their eyes. The corridors seemed to stretch endlessly before them, but Zira's focus was sharp. There was no time for panic. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. "We're almost there," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising clamor. "Stay close. We need to get to the hangar. The shuttle is our only way out." Her team, now down to a handful of members, moved as one, a fluid motion of determination, skill, and adrenaline. But with every step, the tension mounted. The Council's troops were everywhere, their heavy footsteps drawing closer, their presence looming like a dark shadow. When they finally reached the hangar, Zira's breath caught. There in the distance was their shuttle, waiting for them, the sleek vessel gleaming under the harsh artificial lights. But it was surrounded by armed guards, barricades set up, and an entire battalion of Council soldiers converging from all directions. "Damn it," muttered Elias, his voice tight. "We won't make it through that." But Zira's mind was already working, her thoughts racing ahead of the situation. They had to create a diversion, a split-second chance to escape. She turned to her team, her voice low and urgent. "Listen, we'll split into two groups. One will provide cover fire, the other will get to the shuttle. We're going to make it out of here, no matter what." Without hesitation, they nodded, understanding the weight of the decision. Zira knew the risks. She'd seen the carnage that could unfold when plans went awry. But there was no choice now. They couldn't fail. Not after everything they'd done. Zira's group took their positions, preparing to make their move. The hum of blaster fire began to fill the air, sharp, crackling, as she and her team gave it their all, disabling barricades, throwing off the Council soldiers with swift, precise strikes. Her heart was a thundering drum in her chest, but she was more focused than ever before. Her role had shifted from mere scholar to resistance leader, and there was no going back now. And then, just as they were closing in on the shuttle, a figure stepped forward from the shadows. It was one of the Council's top commanders, a man Zira had once known, long ago, when she was still embedded within the ranks of the Council's archives. It was Commander Idris Vallon. Zira's pulse spiked. His eyes locked onto hers across the hangar, his cold gaze filled with years of resentment and power. "So, this is how it ends." His voice echoed through the chaos, the venom in it unmistakable. "You think you can destroy the Council's order, Zira. You think you can tear down everything we've built." Zira's hand tightened around the blaster at her side. The past, the lies, the countless years of subjugation and manipulation, none of it mattered anymore. The time for words was over. This wasn't about ideals or loyalty anymore. It was about survival and the galaxy's future. "I don't think," she said, her voice low and steady. "I know." Without another word, Zira raised her weapon, and the world around them erupted into blinding light. The sounds of blaster fire, explosions, and shouts of fury all mixed together in an unholy symphony. Her heart raced, but there was no fear, only determination. She moved with the same grace and precision that had once been used to catalog the galaxy's most secretive information. But now she was rewriting history, one shot at a time. As she took cover, Elias signaled from the shuttle, urging her to hurry. The final stretch was in sight. She could feel the pull of the future, the endless possibilities waiting beyond the horizon. Then, a sharp explosion tore through the hangar. A cloud of smoke and debris enveloped the space, and for a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Zira blinked through the haze, her ears ringing, but she didn't stop. She dashed toward the shuttle, her team behind her, and in that moment, she knew there was no turning back. With one final, desperate push, they'd made it aboard. The engines roared to life as they took off into the sky, the hangar and its burning wreckage shrinking rapidly behind them. For the first time in years, Zira allowed herself a breath, but the victory felt fleeting. She knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Council had been struck a devastating blow, but the war was far from won. The road ahead was long, and the Resistance's work was only just beginning. As the stars stretched out before them, Zira gazed out at the vast expanse of space, her heart full of fierce resolve. The galaxy had been held captive for too long, shackled by the lies of the Council. But the spark of rebellion had been ignited, and it was spreading fast. The fight wasn't just for survival, it was for something much greater. The chance for every person, every world, to choose their own fate. And in that moment, Zira knew that the galaxy was on the brink of a new dawn, a dawn where freedom would no longer be a distant dream but a reality. The Resistance would rise, the Council would fall, and the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, would finally be free. The war was just beginning, and Zira was ready to lead it all the way to the end.